Hey, how you doing? It's Damien here, and in this video today we're going to have a look at the 9 most common cold email mistakes to avoid. So these are all mistakes that I see people making all the time. When I'm speaking to business owners, talking about cold email, these are the things they're doing wrong, and in almost every case it's drastically affecting reply rates and positive reply rates. So by fixing these mistakes, you're going to be well on the way to getting campaigns, cold email campaigns, working more effectively. So let's jump straight into it. First mistake that I see, I'm just going to move myself over here, is bad messaging. So the message being unclear or confusing, and by that I mean you try to be sort of a bit too clever in the message, or you assume that the reader knows something that they don't. So it's really important for your messages to be simple and clear. There's an old saying in copywriting that clear beats clever. So without trying to be too fancy, just really get the message across. What is it that you do? Who do you help? How do you fix their problem? And along the same lines, you've got a thing which is sophistication level. So what I mean by that is you have to meet the market exactly where they're at. So if you're reaching out to people who are actually experts in the thing that you're talking about, you don't want to go in with a really sort of high level, vague kind of approach that's too general. You want to be as specific as they're ready to absorb. So example of that is if you're reaching out to some kind of IT person, something really technical, don't go in and just sort of talk about, hey, there's this thing that can stop you from getting a virus. You want to go in and say, hey, get more specific about the actual approach that you use and the mechanism that you use, because they're actually able to understand it. The flip side of that is you don't want to go in with too much detail. If you're just talking to business owners about how to help them, get more leads, you don't want to go in and say, oh, first we're going to install a pixel on your website, we're going to do this. They don't need that level of detail. So it's matching the level of detail to the market sophistication. Next problem is too long. So a lot of the time I look at people's emails and we have a tendency we want to tell people all about the great stuff that we can do. But if someone opens your email and it's 300 words long, it's like a mini blog post, they just don't have time to read it. They're busy, they don't have a relationship with you yet. So don't treat them like a marketing email, which can be much longer because you've already got that relationship established. You need to be very, very short. Then again, you don't want to be too short. You have to say enough to inspire them to reply. One sentence email, again, it's great for marketing. There's a famous 9-word email, which is great from a marketing perspective. Are you still wanting to do this thing that you were interested in before? But in a cold email, you have to do a little bit more work. You've only got one sort of bite at the cherry with a lot of these people. So not too short. So we find typically around 100 words is kind of the sweet spot. It's enough detail. It's not too long that it won't be read, but it's not too short that we can't put enough detail about the problems that we solve. Next problem is not using the right software. So a lot of the time I see people either doing things manually, and by that I mean I've talked to people and they're doing cold email and they're just, they've got someone in their office just getting a list and BCCing like 50 people at a time. That's not a good idea for a bunch of reasons, which I won't go into here, but you want to use dedicated software. And the other problem I see is people do use software, but they might use something that's more for email marketing like MailChimp or ActiveCampaign, or even CRMs aren't really made for cold emailing. I see people using Go High Level or HubSpot to do their cold email. Not really purpose built for it. You want to use some specific software that's just for this outreach, because they have features like email warming up your inboxes and making sure they're ready for campaigns. They have features like being able to sequence emails, juggle multiple inboxes, unified inbox. There's dozens of things that they can do. So I'll put a couple of links down below to the types of software we use, and so you can have a look at that. Third one is bad data. So a few different areas here. First thing is using inaccurate contact info. So making sure that you are verifying the data when you get it, and that you're reaching out to the right people. So that can be something as you might actually think that the decision maker in the companies you target is one thing, but it's actually someone else, a whole different seniority level. And we see that all the time. A campaign will bomb and it's like, it wasn't the messaging, it wasn't the offer, it was just we were trying to reach the wrong level in the company. Maybe we're trying to reach out to executives, but it's actually a manager level, which is the person who's going to be making that decision. So inaccurate contact information, lack of segmentation is another one. So what we try to do, if we've got a big list of 5,000 or 10,000 prospects, we don't just want to put them all in one campaign and treat them exactly the same, unless they are kind of similar. But usually we can break that down into sub-lists based on location or job title or industry or things like that. Treat them differently. Another problem we see all the time is outdated data. So you have to make sure if your list is out of date, go and verify it, update your information, and make sure that it's you're reaching out to the right people that are still at those companies. Another issue kind of related to the previous one, but not segmenting and personalizing. So making sure that you understand the audience that you're reaching out to, and again, that you're reaching out to the right person in that company, and then breaking it down by things like job titles. So can we treat CFOs differently than how we would treat a CEO, for example? And then you don't have to create a whole separate campaign for a lot of these. Again, going back to the software I was talking about, good software can actually insert dynamic tags like, hey, I noticed you're the CEO at this company. It must be a challenge with such industry. So it's just basic examples, but you can put different personalization tags in the emails and match it up to their role or their location or things like that. Next problem I see is not understanding the metrics and the goals. So people don't really realize what they should be seeing from cold email. So they might, for example, want to acquire a new customer once a week for their software or their services. And they think that if they're going to send, maybe sending 50 emails a day is going to get them that one customer a week. But if we look at stats, we can see, to acquire a customer from cold email, you typically need to send about 500 emails on average. So, because only about 10% of people are going to reply. And of those replies, probably only about 10% of them are going to be saying, yes, I want to talk. By the time you go through your sales process, you probably end up with one, and that's on average. It can be less in some industries. So making sure you're matching your goals to your actual volume that you're sending. Tracking the relevant metrics, making sure things line up. And we do use open rates. Some people don't track their open rates. We think that is a good measure to see your deliverability. If they're getting opened, they're arriving in the inbox. And just optimizing and iterating, testing different variants, which we'll get to in a minute as well. Problem 6, sending from too few inboxes or domains. So again, I sometimes see people and they're trying to do a campaign and they're sending 200 emails a day, but they're only using one email address to do that. That's a really good way to get yourself blacklisted, and that account's going to get shut down and it's not going to arrive in the inbox. It's just going to get blocked for spam. So you need to be using multiple senders, multiple domains. The more you want to send, the more email accounts you're going to need. And then keeping an eye on the sender reputation to make sure that the accounts aren't getting blacklisted. And if they have been reported for spam or something, taking them out of the campaign, giving them some time to warm up. And then, as I said, making sure you're sending enough emails to hit the goals that you've set, which we discussed on the previous slide. So the next issue I see a lot is people don't really keep an eye on their deliverability. So they haven't set up their domains properly, for starters, but also just making sure your messaging's good, because if your messaging's really spammy, people report you for spam. So making sure the message is good, email authentication is all set up, like your DMARC and your DKIM, and then making sure you put all of your prospect lists through a bounce checker to make sure that you're going to have less than 5% bounce rate. That's what we aim for. And then just complying with any of your local laws around anti-spam. Another thing we see a lot, people just don't test, so they'll just write one email and send that off to 1,000 people and hope for the best. We typically do about 3 variants of the first email and completely different approaches. It could be different offers. We're going to test those different variants to see which one resonates, and we'll see pretty quickly if one of them is standing out in terms of overperforming. Maybe we see one gets way more positive replies than the others and we can turn the others off, or vice versa. One might be getting worse performance than the others and we can turn that one off. So some of the other things we test are subject lines. Well, subject lines isn't a big factor, as much of a factor as people think. We're testing the offer and what we say in the actual body of the email. We're often testing the calls to action, making sure that we're testing different things. Some people will be happy to jump on a phone call. Some people will want lower commitment, like just send me a video or something like that. And also experimenting with things like the timing and the frequency of the emails. So should we be sending them 2 days apart or 5 days apart, things like that. And the final mistake, number 9, not following up. So there's a few different ways people make mistakes in this way. The first one is just having a sequence of emails in your campaign. So instead of just sending one email and then that's it, if you can send a follow-up email a few days later and then another one in the same thread, that works really well. We see higher open rates, higher engagement in those follow-ups because we're sort of making a little bump email and it's coming back to the top of their inbox and just saying, hey, did you see this email? So that's the first type of follow-up. Second one is when someone actually does reply to you and says, yep, happy to chat. if you leave that more than a day or so, the person's much less likely to actually get on a call with you or take that next step that you want them to. That's a mistake I see all the time. We actually get the leads for the client, and then if the client's busy or just not really invested in the process, sometimes those leads just sit there and they get squandered. So having a process where you follow up with the warm leads and engage with them and try to take them to the next step as soon as possible. And then finally, recycling lists and campaigns. So again, some people will run a campaign and then they think that's it. They've heard from me, like what else am I going to do? What we typically do, after about 2 or 3 months, we go back to the exact same list, because on average, 90% of those people haven't replied to your campaign, no matter how good it was or how relevant. 90% either just, they were busy or they didn't have a need at the time, but we can just go back to that same list, exclude the people who replied to the first one, and email that other 90%. We do see a diminishing returns on that, but it's still definitely worth it compared to having to go out and source a whole new batch of data to do a different campaign. So they're the 9 mistakes I see all the time. If you fix those problems, you're going to be heading on the right track to fix your cold email. So hope that was helpful.